Welcome to this video on Indian architecture during the Vedic Age, covering the period from 1500 to 600 BCE. We will explore how early settlements and sacred geometry laid the foundations of Indian architectural thought.
The Vedic Age followed the decline of the Harappan civilization and is named after the sacred Vedas. Unlike the planned cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, Vedic society was primarily rural and depended on agriculture and cattle rearing. Buildings were constructed using locally available materials such as wood, bamboo, mud, reeds, and thatch. These materials were economical, sustainable, and suitable for the climate, but did not last for thousands of years. Architecture during this period was influenced by natural resources, environmental conditions, religious beliefs, social organization, and the everyday needs of agricultural communities. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to identify the major characteristics of Vedic architecture and explain how settlements were planned. You should understand the construction methods and materials used in residential buildings and describe the importance of religious structures like the Yajna-Vedi. You will also learn how climate, culture, and available resources influenced architectural decisions. Finally, we will see how many planning concepts introduced during the Vedic period, such as courtyard planning and sacred geometry, continued to influence Indian architecture for centuries. This timeline helps us understand where the Vedic Age fits within ancient Indian history. The Indus Valley Civilization flourished around 3300 BCE. After its decline, the early Vedic period began around 1500 BCE, followed by the later Vedic period around 1000 BCE. By about 600 BCE, the Mahajanapada period marked the beginning of organized kingdoms and urban development. Therefore, the Vedic Age acts as a bridge between the highly organized Harappan cities and the emergence of large political states, contributing significantly to the evolution of Indian architectural ideas. Vedic architecture was simple, practical, and closely connected with nature. Settlements were mainly villages rather than cities, and buildings were temporary because they were constructed from wood, bamboo, mud, and grass. Houses generally had sloping roofs to drain rainwater efficiently and open courtyards that improve ventilation and daylight. Religious activities centered around fire altars instead of temples. Planning considered natural surroundings, climate, and community life. Although simple in appearance, these buildings reflected sustainable construction practices and environmental adaptation, concepts that remain important in modern civil engineering. Vedic villages were established near rivers, forests, fertile agricultural land, and grazing fields. Houses were arranged around common community spaces where people met and conducted social activities. Open areas between houses improved air circulation and reduced overcrowding. Sacred groves, ponds, and fire altars formed important parts of the settlement. Unlike Harappan cities with straight roads and drainage systems, Vedic villages developed naturally according to the landscape. This planning approach ensured easy access to water, farming land, livestock, and religious spaces, making settlements both practical and sustainable. Several important factors determined where Vedic settlements were established. Water availability was the primary requirement, so villages were built near rivers, such as the Ganga, Yamuna, and Saraswati. Fertile land supported agriculture, which was the main occupation. Forests provided timber, fuel, food, and protection from enemies and wild animals. These natural resources encouraged permanent settlements and supported economic growth. Over time, religious and social activities also became central to village life. These considerations resemble today's site selection process, where engineers evaluate water availability, land suitability, safety, and environmental conditions. The materials used for Vedic houses were entirely natural and locally available. Timber formed the structural framework, while bamboo was used for walls and roofing. Mud plaster strengthened the walls and improved insulation. Straw and grass provided lightweight thatched roofing, and clay created smooth, hygienic floors. These materials were inexpensive, renewable, and environmentally friendly. Although they required regular maintenance and were less durable than stone or brick, they were highly suitable for the available technology and climate. Today, sustainable architecture often promotes similar, eco-friendly materials to reduce environmental impact. Vedic houses had shallow foundations because they supported lightweight structures. Walls consisted of wooden or bamboo frames coated with mud plaster. Sloping thatched roofs effectively drained rainwater while keeping interiors cool. Floors were made from compacted earth, finished with clay and cow dung, providing a smooth, durable, and hygienic surface. Houses were organized around an open courtyard, allowing natural light and cross-ventilation. These design features reduced indoor temperatures without mechanical cooling. Even today, architects used similar climate-responsive principles to create energy-efficient and environmentally sustainable buildings. A typical Vedic house included a living room, bedroom, kitchen, storage space, animal shed, and a central open courtyard. The courtyard served as the heart of family activities, while improving ventilation and daylight. The major advantages of these houses were their low construction cost, use of local materials, environmental sustainability, and thermal comfort. However, they also had several limitations. The buildings were vulnerable to fire, heavy rainfall, and biological decay, requiring frequent maintenance. Despite these challenges, the planning principles remained effective and influenced traditional Indian housing for centuries. Religion played a central role in Vedic life, but temples did not yet exist. Instead, religious ceremonies were performed around the Yajna Vedi, or sacred fire altar. These altars were usually square or rectangular, and built from compacted earth or bricks. They were carefully oriented according to Vedic rituals, and served as the center for fire worship, sacrifices, community ceremonies, and social gatherings. Unlike later temple architecture, worship focused on sacred fire rather than permanent idols. This makes the fire altar the most important architectural feature of the Vedic period. The Yajna Vedi consisted of a raised sacred platform where the fire was maintained during rituals. Priests conducted ceremonies while devotees gathered around the altar. Offerings and ritual objects were arranged systematically around the platform. One remarkable feature was the use of sacred geometry. The dimensions and proportions of the altar followed precise mathematical rules described later in the Sulba Sutras. These geometric principles eventually influenced Indian architectural planning, temple construction, and structural layouts, demonstrating an early connection between mathematics, religion, and architecture. Besides homes and fire altars, Vedic villages included several community spaces. Village assembly areas were used for discussions and administration. Grazing lands supported livestock, which formed an important part of the economy. Community wells supplied water for domestic and religious purposes. Ritual grounds accommodated ceremonies, while market areas gradually appeared during the later Vedic period as trade expanded. These shared spaces encouraged cooperation and social interaction. Modern urban planning also emphasizes the importance of public spaces, showing that community-centered planning has ancient roots in Indian civilization. The Vedic people worshipped natural forces such as fire, wind, rain, and the sun rather than permanent idols. Religious rituals focused on fire altars and sacred geometry. Over many centuries, these ideas gradually evolved into temple architecture. The careful orientation, proportions, and planning methods used for Yajna Vedas became the foundation for designing Hindu temples. Thus, although temples were absent during the early Vedic period, the architectural concepts developed through ritual planning strongly influenced later religious architecture. This transition highlights the continuous evolution of Indian architectural traditions. Although Vedic architecture was simple, it demonstrates several engineering principles that remain relevant today. Buildings responded effectively to local climate through sloping roofs, thick mud walls, natural ventilation, and open courtyards. Construction relied on renewable materials such as bamboo, timber, clay, and grass, minimizing environmental impact. Village planning integrated residential areas, agricultural land, water sources, religious spaces, and common gathering places. These ideas reflect modern concepts of sustainable development, climate-responsive architecture, and environmentally responsible construction, making Vedic architecture an early example of sustainable engineering practices. The influence of Vedic architecture continued long after the Vedic age ended. The concept of courtyard planning became a defining feature of traditional Indian houses across different regions. Sacred geometry developed for fire altars later guided temple design and construction. The use of locally available materials inspired generations of builders. Today, architects once again recognize the value of passive cooling, natural ventilation, and sustainable materials. Therefore, many ideas first introduced during the Vedic period continue to influence modern architecture, proving the lasting significance of these ancient engineering concepts. To summarize, Vedic architecture was rural and temporary, defined by natural materials and local climate. Centered on the open courtyard, these homes and the geometrically precise yajna fire altars established core principles that would eventually serve as the foundation for the magnificent temple architecture seen in later Indian history.